Hello, I am Dr. Rita P. Bhambi, Associate Professor and Head Department of Guru Nanak Khalsa College, Matunga. Today, I am going to discuss here with your topic paper Indian National Movement and the unit number 1, in which the title of the unit is Evolution of Nationalism in India. This unit is divided into 3 parts. First part deals with the nationalism, a theoretical interpretation in which I am going to discuss about the nationalism, how different schools of thoughts has described, they had given their definitions about the nationalism. The B part deals with the genesis of Indian nationalism, that means how the nationalism took place here in India. If we look at the Indians were ruled by the foreigners from the 10th century onwards. But Indians never realized that they are ruled by the foreigners. It was during the British rule of 100 years and suddenly Indians realized that they are ruled by the foreigners. So what are the factors, what are the causes which were responsible for the growth of the Indian nationalism? I will discuss in the B part, and B part also deals with that how this nationalism emerged among the Indians and they started forming the association to present their grievances to the Britishers. Now, for example, no doubt at that time certain associations were regional in characters. They represent only the typical class where they have been formed. They were not representing the total all India's people's grievances to the Britishers. But these associations in fact paved the way for the founding of the Indian National Congress. Now these associations, particularly with special reference to 3 presidencies under the British rule, that is Bengal, Bombay and Madras presidencies. Now next the C part deals with the formation of Indian National Congress. How the Indian National Congress was formed, their aims, objectives. So in this way, the first unit, Evolution of Nationalism in India, in 3 parts, which I am going to discuss with you at present. First, I will start with the Evolution of Nationalism in India. This subject unit aims at introducing students to understand the approaches of Indian nationalism, aware the conceptual debates of Indian nationalism. Now I am starting with the nationalism, a theoretical interpretation, how it is interpreted by the different schools of thoughts. When we study the political conquest of vast country like India by a small country England, the first point that strikes one is as to how such a feat could all at be possible. But if one knew the Indian temperament and tradition, it would not be difficult to understand. India had been ruled by foreigners from the 10th century onwards. But though they came as foreigners, they settled down and made India their home against the foreigners. And understanding soon effected and they became members of great India, of great Indian family. As long as the British were mainly trading concerned, they did not excite any hostility. But when they became the master, their loyalty was with their mother country, not with India. They never Indianized themselves. Thus, Indian people recognized the British rule as an alien rule. Amongst the most important result of British rule in India were the emergence of Indian nationality and the growth of nationalism. The second half of the 19th century saw the birth of a new consciousness in India as a result of growth of English education, press, railways and communication. The consciousness expressed itself in socio-religious reform movements, publication of journals and books, and formation of political associations. The English-educated middle class worked as the harbinger of this consciousness. Though initially loyal to the British government, this class realized the exploitative and discriminatory character of the colonial rule and raised its voice of protest. Consequently, the spirit of nationalism grew. This ultimately culminated in the foundation of the Indian National Congress. Now I am going to deal with the definition of nationalism. Nationalism is a spirit, an elemental force which derived its inspiration from the natural desire of man to be free, expressing itself in political institutions and activities. The desire to be free is inborn in every people and expresses itself in the form of political action whenever they become conscious that the evils from which they are suffering are the direct outcome of the political system under which they live. Aurobindo Ghosh said that the nationalism is a religion that has come from God. Nationalism is a creed in which you shall have to live. It is an attitude of heart, of the soul. On the whole, nationalism is a political sentiment, whereas for the people of India, it is both a religion and a creed. The nationalist movement in India revolved round in overthrowing of British colonial power from India and making the country free from the clutches of the British imperialism. Another definition mentioned in the encyclopedia is nationalism, political or social philosophy in which the welfare of the nation state as an entity is considered paramount. Nationalism is basically a collective state of mind or consciousness in which people believe their primary duty and loyalty is to the nation state. Often nationalism implies national superiority and glorifies various national virtues. Thus, love of nation may be overemphasized. Concern with national self-interest to the exclusion of the rights of other nations may lead to international conflict. Nationalism is a comparatively recent phenomena, probably born with the French Revolution, but despite its short history, it has been extremely important in forming the bonds that hold modern nations together. Today, it operates alongside the legal structure and supplements the formal institution of society in providing much of the cohesiveness and order necessary for the existence of the modern nation state. The meaning of nationalism is a sentiment based on common cultural characteristics that binds the people and often produces a policy of national independence. Nationalism can be defined as combination of common culture and ideology brought together by the common will of the people. Although since times people of India held a notion that the country was one, the concept of India as a nation was non-existence. The concept arose after the British occupation of the country, like other colonial states. Nationalism in the country was marked by the negative feelings against the British and the rise of national consciousness in the 19th century. The term nationalism is very difficult to define. Several attempts have been made by various scholars, but the term nationalism remains conceptually evasive. The variable nature of nationalism perhaps responsible for this conceptual confusion. The challenge of nationalism in colonial India was twofold: to forge a national unity and to claim its right to self-determination. India has been a plural society with various forms of diversity, such as region, language, religion, ethnicity, and so on. It was from this diversity, the building of a nation. Agreement among the historians, however, stops here. How did the Indians imagine their nation is a matter of intense controversy and ongoing debate. Now I am discussing with the early nationalist schools, their thoughts. The early nationalist school, while studying the process of nation building, focused on the supremacy of nationalist ideology and national consciousness. This awareness is based on antipathy towards colonial rule, a feeling of patriotism, and an ideology rooted in the sense of pride in India's ancient traditions. But this school ignored the inner conflicts within the Indian society, which led to its division into two nations. Second school of thought is the new traditional school. In opposition to this, a new interpretation emerged in the Anglo-American academia. Rajat Ray labeled it as the new traditionalist school. According to this school, the important change of the colonial rule was the introduction of Western education and political representations. This created new group, that is the Western educated elite. The decision in 1835 to provide English rather than vernacular education, from that time onward, the best brain of India drank deeply at the well springs of the British liberal thoughts. The Indian learned from Edmund Burke and John Stuart Mill the meaning of liberty. They shared the sympathy of England with the struggle of Mazzini and Cavour, and they read the French Revolution and the struggle of Ireland for freedom. Their political consciousness was aroused, and they began to apply the ideas of right of individuals and people to their own country. There was nothing unexpected about the growth of nationalism and ultimately gain of independence. Even British administrators denied the existence of any feeling of nationality in India. In 1883, J.R. Seeley described India as a mere geographical expression with no sense whatever of national unity. In 1884, John Starchy, an ex-Indian civil servant, told the alumni of Cambridge University, "This is the first and last essential thing to learn about India, that there is not and never was an India." He further forecasts that India will never become a united nation. The Marxist school of thought, they had given their own definitions. The orthodox Marxist school sought to analyze the class character of the nationalist movement. They explained in terms of the economic development of the colonial period, that is the rise of industrial capitalism and the development of a market society in India. It identified the bourgeoisie leadership which directed this movement to suit their own class interest and neglected the interest of the masses. These narrow class approaches of the early Marxists were qualified in the later Marxist writings of S.N. Mukherjee, Sumit Sarkar and Bipin Chandra. S.N. Mukherjee pointed out the complexities of nationalism, its multiple layers and meanings, the importance of caste along with class, and use of traditional and modern languages of politics. Sumit Sarkar in his book Modern India has warned us that class and class consciousness are analytical tools which have to use more skillfully and flexibly. He recognized the legitimacy of nationalism but does not ignore the internal tension within it. Bipin Chandra and his colleagues have given Marxist interpretation differently. They argue that Indian nationalist movement was a popular movement of various classes. In colonial India, they showed two types of contradictions. One was between the interest of Indian people and those of the British rule, and India's contradiction within the Indian society between classes, caste and religious communities. This view is not accepted because the nationalist movement was not the movement of single class or caste or a religious community. Our leaders like Mahatma Gandhi and Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru had recognized that India was not a structured nation but a nation in making. The subaltern's views. A new intervention in this debate came in 1982 when the first volume of the Subaltern Studies, edited by Ranjit Guha, was published with this statement: "The historiography of Indian nationalism has for a long time been dominated by elitism." He further said that it cannot explain Indian nationalism because it neglects the contribution made by the people on their own. This radical Marxist school thinks that organized national movement which led to the formation of Indian nation state was hollow nationalism of the elites, while real nationalism was that of the masses, which it calls the subaltern. Although the subaltern from time to time participated in the political movements initiated by the bourgeoisie, the latter failed to speak for nation. So after going through all these thoughts, I conclude the conceptual, theoretical definition of nationalism. I can say, after going through this debate on nationalism, we will focus on the different levels at which this consciousness was developing and try to analyze how such various focus of consciousness intersected and interacted with each other, how they viewed contradiction within Indian society. In the closing decade of the 19th century and first decade of the 20th century, nationalism had grown and was gaining strength. The British scholars struck a new posture. The Montfort report claimed credit that British rule was the harbinger of nationalist upsurge in India. R. Copeland said that Indian nationalism was the child of the Raj. Such a view belittles the role of Indians, particularly the Indian middle class, in the development of nationalism. We can conclude that Indian nationalism was the product of the wide upsurge of the concepts of nationalism and right of self-determination initiated by the French Revolution, the result of Indian Renaissance, the modernization initiated by the British in India, and developed a strong reaction to British imperial policies in India. So this is what about nationalism, a theoretical interpretation. Questions can come on this one. Define nationalism and discuss the views of the early nationalist school, new traditional school, and the Marxist school. Second question can come in the form of, what do you understand by the term nationalism? Discuss the views of various schools on the term nationalism. Third type of question can come, what do you meant by nationalism? Point out the various conceptual debates of Indian nationalism. So with this, part A comes to an end. Now I am starting with the part 2, Genesis of Indian nationalism. The objective of this part 2, Genesis of Indian nationalism, is that acquaint with the factors responsible for the growth of nationalism in India. As already I have told you, according to me, nationalism is a feeling of belongingness, which was absent before the coming of the Britishers. So if we look at the Indians, as I have told you earlier also, India is ruled by the foreigners from the 10th century onwards. But Indians never realized that they are the foreigners. So a small period of time, we can say 100 years of the period of time of the Britishers' rule, made Indians very clearly that they are ruled by the foreigners, not by the Indians. The basic reason I want to tell you here, that these foreigners, whether they are the Muslims, Mughals who came and ruled over India, these people came, they settled in India, they Indianized themselves, and whatever they did for the development of the country only, whatever they did here in the country. But Britishers never Indianized themselves. Their loyalty was much more with the Britain than with the India. So that was the reason. So it's not only a single factor or single cause was responsible for creating such type of feeling among the Indians. So many causes were there, which I am going to discuss about this one. And very important is that students should know the emergence and development of the political associations in the three presidencies, Calcutta, Bombay and Madras. As the British extended their sway over India, feeling of resentment grew amongst the people. It was based on their perception that new rulers were responsible for the economic hardships. They felt that they were being looked down upon in their own country. The intensity of discontent against foreign rule became visible through different uprisings. The revolt of 1857 sprang up as an outburst of discontent of masses in different parts of the country. It was since then that the educated middle class people began to emerge in the society and seemed to the hope of future ideals of nationalism and patriotism were given popular forms in songs, poems and play. British policies were blamed for deteriorating the economic condition of the people. These ideas found expression in some dramas, programs also. Bankim Chandra Chatterjee wrote historical novels. His most well-known is Anand Math, which also contained the song Bande Mataram. The year 1885 marks the beginning of a new epoch in Indian history because put under the name of Indian National Congress, which prepared the platform for an organized national movement. So first very important factors or the causes responsible for the growth of nationalism. As I told you, not only the single but many factors contributed to the emergence and growth of political consciousness or concept of nationalism among the Indians. The foremost and the first very important factor which was responsible was the political unity of India. Contribution of British rule in India had negative and positive points. Among the positive contribution was the political unity which British imperialism and English language gave. When they came, India was a land of various factions. The Marathas, the Sikhs, the Jats and the Muslims had broken up the country into conglomerates of states, each having its own political and territorial existence. The British pressed them all together under the steamroller of their military might, which brought about political unification. For the first time, the entire Indian territory were brought under the one rule. The British conquered the whole India and created the largest state under one centralized administration. Thus, common subjection, common institution and laws began to shape India in a common mold. After the Cohatic conditions of 18th century, the British established peace and orderly government in India. The administration began to conducted on the principle of law. The establishment of political unity and uniform system of administration generated a feeling of oneness among the people. So second very important cause was the development of means of transport and communication. The administrative convenience, movement of military and urge of economic penetration and commercial exploitation were the main aims for the development of the means of transport. A network of roads and railways were laid down and linked one province with another and big cities with rural areas. The introduction of telegraph and railways 1852 and 1853 respectively gave India swift means of transport and communication. They broke the age-old isolation of villages and people had the opportunity of coming closer to each other. Moreover, they promoted trade and commerce and helped people of different regions to develop social and intellectual intercourse. National literature could be circulated through the post offices and operated in every corner of the country. Even telegraph brought about a revolution in the speedy transmission of messages. Thus, the modern means of communication enabled people living in different parts of India to maintain contacts and thus promoted the cause of nationalism. In fact, modern organizations like Indian National Congress, the Indian Trade Union Congress, etc. could neither have come into existence nor could function on national level without the facilities provided by the modern means of transport and communication. Another cause was the introduction of modern education. The introduction of modern system of education gave a new direction to Indian political thinking. T.B. Macaulay's decision in 1835 to provide English rather than vernacular education inaugurated the system of English education in India. The purpose of English education conceived for efficient administration. They needed Indian clerks educated in English in order to run their rule. But it opened floodgates of liberal European thoughts among the educated Indians. The second half of the 19th century was the golden age of liberalism in Europe, particularly in England. The study of the political classic of English literature, from Milton to Mill, planted seeds of liberalism like nationalism and democracy in the minds of English educated Indians. They read the works of Mazzini in Italy, Rousseau and Voltaire of France, Macaulay and Mill of England. The works of these champions of liberty, liberalism and nationalism developed political consciousness and unity among Indians. Rabindranath Tagore said that they had come to know England through her glorious literature, which had brought new inspiration to our young lives. The English authors, whose books and poems they had studied, were full of love, humanity, justice and freedom. English served as a common language for the Indians. It provided a common forum for the intellectuals of India to draw closer to each other and exchange their ideas. In the words of K.M. Panikkar, the uniform system of education throughout India, through a single language, produced among Indians the like-mindedness, the community of thought, feeling and ideas. Another very important cause, the development of Indian press and literature. The Indian press and literature, both English and vernacular, aroused national consciousness among the people. It was the Europeans who set up printing press in India and published newspaper and literature. The nationalist newspapers such as Indian Mirror, Amrit Bazar Patrika, the Indian National Herald, the Hindu, exposed the evils of the British and played a great role in the growth of Indian nationalism. It was very vocal in its criticism of the policies pursued by the British in India. The editors wrote fearlessly and exposed freely the evils of the foreign rule. Editors like Lala Lajpat Rai of the Vande Mataram and the People and Bal Gangadhar Tilak of Kesari and Maratha suffered deportation. 5 editors of Yugantar were paid behind the bars. The nationalist press had to pay a very heavy price for its nationalist views. Thus, the press became the mirror of the Indian nationalism and the primary medium of popular education. The literature produced during the period such as novels, plays, poems greatly helped in the national awakening. The novel Anand Math and Vande Mataram of Bankim Chandra became a great source of inspiration to the people. For the first time, it was sung at the annual session of the Indian National Congress. Literatures produced by Bhartendu Harishchandra in Hindi, Vishnu Shastri Chiplunkar in Marathi, S. Bharti in Tamil, and Ravindranath Tagore in Bengali affected the minds of the people. They brought revolution in the minds of the people that were responsible for the growth of nationalism. The bad condition of the masses, as depicted in the writings of Dadabhai Naoroji and R.C. Dutt, touched the conscience of the intellectual and made them aware of the exploitative nature of the British economic policies. Next important cause was the emergence of the middle class intelligentsia. British administrative and economic innovations gave rise to a new urban middle class. They learnt English, for it promoted employment and gave a sense of prestige. This class proved to be soul of modern India and provided leadership to the Indian National Congress in all stages of growth. Both Indian and European scholars began to dig the mysteries of India's past. They emphasized the past glory and the rich heritage of India. The study and publication of ancient Indian literature by the scholars like Max Muller, Monier Williams, Roth, Ranade, Harprasad Shastri, R.G. Bhandarkar, Rajendra Lal Mitra opened new vistas of India's rich cultural heritage. They praised Vedas and Upanishads for their literary merit. India was rediscovered and people became proud of their glorious past. Another factor responsible for the growth of nationalism is the impact of the socio-religious reform movements. In the 19th century, educated Indians began to examine their religious belief and social practices. The result was development of various socio-religious reform movements which prepared the ground for the growth of national movement and watered the plant of patriotism. Reformers like Raja Ram Mohan Rai, Swami Dayanand Saraswati, Devendranath Tagore, Keshav Chandra Sen, Swami Vivekanand, and others infused a new spirit of faith and courage. Raja Ram Mohan Roy, the founder of Brahmo Samaj, was the pioneer of Indian Renaissance. Besides reforming Hindu religion and society, the Brahmo Samaj injected nationalism in Indian body politics. Swami Dayanand Saraswati founded Arya Samaj. He preached to the people the lesson of self-confidence and faith in their future. He reminded them the glory and greatness of India's past. Ramakrishna Paramahansa exercised great influence on his followers. His disciple Swami Vivekananda helped people in reviving their faith in themselves and also in the future of the country. These reformers launched a crusade against the abuses and evils of Hindu society and religion. They taught the people to have faith in themselves. Another factor responsible was the racial arrogance. One unfortunate legacy of the rebellion of 1857 was the feeling of racial bitterness between the rulers and the ruled. Indians resented the attitude of the Englishmen towards them. The Europeans in India were arrogant. They had a very low opinion of the Indian character. They openly insulted Indians and took pleasure in calling them half gorilla, half Negro. Racial arrogance branded all Indians irrespective of their caste, religion, provinces or class with the badge of inferiority. The Indians were prevented from entering in European clubs and travelling in upper-class railway compartments. This racial arrogance of the Englishmen made Indians conscious of national humiliation and put them on the defensive. Another very important factor which was responsible was the economic exploitation. The worst feature of the British rule in India was the economic exploitation of Indian people of all classes. Since the main motive of the British rule in India was economic exploitation, they adjusted the economic policies to the needs of the people in England. The British imposed a policy of one-way free trade in India, and British cotton textile flooded in the markets of India. These machine-made cotton textiles were cheaper, and Indian cloth made with traditional technique could not compete with machine-made goods. British officers also forced Indian craftsmen to sell their goods below the market price. Thus, the policy of economic exploitation ruined Indian industries. This increased dependence of people on agriculture. Even peasants became landless as they were required to pay very high land revenues. Moreover, the growing commercialization of agriculture helped the moneylender to exploit the peasant. The Indian traders suffered due to the competition from British traders. Above all, the British officials working in India had become a drain in the Indian resources. The interest of the British in India was to promote their industry and commerce. India became a supplier of raw material for the British factories and a market for the British finished goods. Between 1858 to 1918, 6 great famines occurred in India, which was followed by epidemics. Even during the famine times, export of food grains continued. The hardships faced by people convinced them the British rule was the major cause of their starvation, misery and death. This developed a hatred for foreign rule and love for Swadeshi goods. The spirit of nationalism received a powerful stimulus in the process. As I've told you, some of the Viceroy's policies which were in favor of the Britishers, naturally they were liked by the Britishers and hated by the Indians. But some of the policies by the Viceroys, they worked for the favor of the Indians. They were liked by the Indians but hated by the Britishers. But their policies were also responsible for the growth of the Indian nationalism. So among them, the Lord Lytton's reactionary policy was also responsible for the growth of nationalism among the Indian. The period from 1870-1884 has been called the seed time of Indian nationalism. The acts of omission and commission in the time of Lord Lytton accelerated the nationalist movement. Lord Lytton held his famous Dilli Darbar in 1877 at a time when the people of South India were suffering terribly from the destruction brought about by famine. Most of the import duties on British textile imports were removed to please the textile manufacturers of England. The action was interpreted by Indians as proof of the British desire to ruin small but growing textile industry in India. In 1878, the Arms Act was passed which disarmed the Indians. It appeared to India as an attempt by the government to weaken the whole nation. The Second Afghan War cost the Indian treasury a lot. Lytton passed the Vernacular Press Act, which empowered the district magistrate to require the editor of a newspaper written in Indian languages to enter into a bond to publish nothing likely to excite the feelings of dissatisfaction and strong feelings of dislike between persons of different races, caste and religion. It was condemned by the politically conscious Indians. It has been pointed out that the act was retrograde and ill-conceived measure injurious to the future progress of India. At the time, in 1878, the government announced new regulation reducing the maximum age limit for sitting in the civil service examination from 21 years to 19. The Indian found it difficult to compete with the English boys since the examination was conducted in England and in English. All these measures created widespread discontentment among the Indian. Anti-Indian administration of Lord Lytton helped to identify discontent against the foreign rule. Next factor was the Albert Bill controversy. During the viceroyalty of Lord Ripon arose the controversy concerning the Albert Bill. Ripon tried to pass a law to enable Indian district magistrate and session judges to try European in criminal cases. So far, Indian judges had been debarred from trying European British subjects purely on racial grounds. The Englishmen in India considered the bill an attempt on the part of Lord Ripon to exalt Indians and dethrone Europeans. They lost all balance and control and rose in revolt against Lord Ripon. To carry on their agitation, the English formed the Anglo-Indian and European Defence Association. Ripon was personally insulted. They poured abuses on Indians. Lord Ripon became the target of agitation. Europeans declared that even the most highly educated among the Indians were unfit to try any European. In the end, the government bowed before the Europeans and modified the bill. The modified bill provided that the European British subject brought for trial before the district magistrate or a session judge could claim trial by a jury of 12, of whom at least 7 must be European. The modified bill was passed in January 1884. The educated Indians could never forget the lesson of the Albert Bill. They saw the power of agitation. The Indian became conscious of the degradation to which foreign rule had reduced them. It increased racial bitterness and led to the growth of national discontent. The anti-Albert agitation strengthened the forces, speeding up the birth of Congress movement. So this was the factors responsible for the emergence of Indian nationalism. And in the B part, second part is the development of political association in Bengal, Bombay and Madras Presidency. I am starting with that one. The Indian National Congress, which was founded in 1885, was not the first political association established in India. As early as 1833, Lord Macaulay, in his speech before the House of Commons, had explained the implication office of his educational policy. One important effect of the introduction of Western culture in India was the growth of modern political thoughts like nationalism, nationality, political rights, etc. The Indian subcontinent witnessed the growth of political ideas and political organization. It were political association which heralded 19th century India into modern politics. So first, Bengal Presidency was there, where, as I have told you, the associations were formed. No doubt these associations represent the region where they have formed, the aspirations and the demands of those people who were the member of those association. They were not representing the association on the all India basis. But these were the early steps or efforts which ultimately paved the way for the founding of the Indian National Congress. So I am starting with the political association in the Bengal Presidency. The place in British India that first received the impact of the British rule was Bengal because it formed the nerve center of British administration. Raja Ram Mohan Roy was the pioneer of political movement in India. He was greatly influenced by Western ideas. He was the first Indian to focus the attention of the Englishmen on the grievances of India and ask for remedial measures. He demanded liberty of the press, appointment of Indians in civil courts and other higher posts, codification of law, etc. The first society was founded was the Landholders Society. In November 1837, the Landholders Society of Calcutta met at Hindu College, established an association to safeguard their interest. It was inaugurated in July 1838 and called Zamindari Association, but popularly known as the Landholders Society. It was open to all persons having any stake in the land. Although limited in its objectives, the Landholders Society marks the beginning of an organized political activity. It used the method of constitutional agitation for the redress of grievances. The Bengal British Indian Society. In April 1833, another political association called the Bengal British Indian Society was founded with wider political objectives. 5 resolutions were passed in the inaugural meeting of the association explaining the scope and objects of the society. Its aims was the collection and dissemination of information relating to the actual condition of the people of British India and laws and institutions and resources of the country, and to employ such other means of peaceful, lawful character as may appear calculated to secure the welfare, extend the just rights, and advance the interest of all classes of our fellow subjects. The British Indian Association. However, both the societies did not flourish well, and on 29th October 1851, the two associations were merged into a new one named the British Indian Association. The main reason for the establishment of this association was the agitation of the European community against the 4 bills which extended jurisdiction of the East India Company's criminal courts over the British-born subjects. While the Indian intelligentsia supported these bills, Britishers in Bengal called them Black Acts and started agitation and forced the government to withdraw the bills. This shocked the educated Indians in Bengal, who felt the need of a strong association and founded the British Indian Association. Radhakant Dev was chosen as the president and Devendranath Tagore as its secretary. A small committee was appointed to manage the affairs of the association. From the starting, the association had an all-India outlook. They had great faith in the British goodwill and sense of justice. The membership of the Indian Association was not large. It included some of the wealthiest and influential figures of the community of Calcutta. Its mouthpiece, the Hindu Patriot, became one of the most read weekly newspaper of that time in India. The primary aim of the British Indian Association was to represent Indian interest in the debates regarding future government in India. A petition was sent to the Parliament complaining against grievances and urging for relief. Afterwards, a number of petitions were submitted to the British authorities, both in India and England. These petitions served as to enlighten the government and to educate the public. Among the main reforms for which the association petitioned were the reconstitution of the Legislative Council on liberal basis, a demand for increased employment of Indians in the higher services, holding of the Indian Civil Services examination simultaneously in India and England, reduction of government expenditures and duties on imported cotton goods, additional grants for education and improvement in the administration of police, justice, etc. Due to these efforts of the British Indian Association, the Charter Act of 1853 gave effect to some of its demands. However, its demands for the inclusion of Indians in the legislature was not accepted. The British Indian Association, in spite of its advanced views, failed to keep pace with the growth of nationalism and the advanced political ideas. It could not develop a popular or representative organization. Its membership was limited to those who paid an annual membership of 50 rupees. The association was dominated by wealthy zamindars of Calcutta. Thus, after 1858, the association identified itself with the interest of the landlords. This attitude became clear in the petition sent to the British Parliament in 1859, requesting to introduce the permanent settlement all over India. It shows an appeal to class interest. There was nothing national about it. Thus, association could not meet the aspiration of the middle class community in Bengal, which was developing new ideas of patriotism and politics. By 1860s, this middle class composed of clerks, government employees, shopkeepers, teachers, lawyers and doctors. The British Indian Association failed to secure any advantages for the educated middle class. The Indian Association. Dissatisfied by the British Indian Association, there was a desire for a more dynamic organization. Thus, the Indian Association in Calcutta was founded on 26 July 1876. The objective of the Indian Association was to represent the people and promote by every legitimate means the political, intellectual and the national advantage of the people. Surendranath Banerjee outlined the ideals of the association, which are the creation of a strong public opinion in India towards political questions, the unification of the people on a common political program, the promotion of a friendly relation between the Hindus and Muslims. Now they had started with the different agitation. The first very important agitation which they had started, that is the civil service agitation. Consistent with its objectives of promoting a national movement, the Indian Association attempted to take such issues which were known controversial. One such question was the exclusion of Indians from high offices in their own country because of holding of the ICS examination only in England. This was an old question, but brought to the forefront by an order of the Secretary of the State for India, Lord Salisbury, reducing the upper age limit for the civil services examination from 21 to 19 years. It was regarded as a deliberate attempt on the part of the British authorities to damage the prospectus of Indian candidates for the Indian civil services. The association decided to organize a national protest against this order. The civil service question became the battle cry of an all India movement. It united Indians and by providing them with the genuine grievances and a right cause. The real purpose of the agitation was the awakening of a spirit of unity and solidarity among the people of India. On 24th March 1877, public demonstration was held in the Albert Hall, Calcutta. The speakers demanded the restoration of the higher age limit for the civil service examination, but also holding the examination simultaneously in India and in England. A committee was appointed to draw up and forward the proposed memorial to the British Parliament. Surendranath Banerjee was deputed to visit other Indian provinces as a special delegate to bring them on a common platform. He toured Lahore, Amritsar, Meerut, Delhi, Aligarh, Agra, Lucknow, Kanpur, Allahabad, Benares and Patna, during the summer of the 1877. In the winter, he visited Bombay, Ahmedabad, Surat, Pune and Madras in the same capacity. His tour was a remarkable success, and such tours have become one of the chief features of the Indian politics since then. This agitation regarded as the first political movement on an all-India basis, and Surendranath Banerjee could be considered as the first politician to receive all-India popularity. As a result of his tours, many branches of the Indian Association were formed in other parts of Bengal and India. The memorial for the modification of the order was sent with Lal Mohan Ghosh, who would deliver personally to the House of Commons. As a result, the Indian government was empowered to make direct appointment for the civil service from amongst the Indian of proved merit and ability. This order was laid on the table of the House of Commons within 24 hours, and Indian politicians were greatly impressed by the fast action taken by the British Parliament. They regarded it as a great victory for constitutional agitation. Next very important agitation was the agitation against Vernacular Press Act. The success of the Indian Association on the question of the civil services increased the belief in the efficiency of the constitutional methods. Lord Lytton introduced the Vernacular Press Act in 1878, curtailing the freedom of the vernacular press, and the Arms Act. The Indian Association called a public meeting on 17th April 1878 to protest against these measures of Lord Lytton. The meeting decided to send a memorial to the British Parliament. British Liberal opposition leader Gladstone moved the resolution in the House of Commons on 23rd July 1878, and the resolution was debated in the Parliament. This resulted in the making the British public of the growing political consciousness and agitation in India. The Vernacular Press Act was modified and was finally repealed by Lord Ripon, who became the Viceroy in 1880. The Albert Bill controversy. Two events in 1883 gave fresh stimulus to Indian Association in promoting political consciousness among the people. The first was the Albert Bill. In those days, British could not try in criminal cases by any Indian judge. The Albert Bill sought to remove this racial inequality. An agitation was started by the Englishmen against this bill. They organized defense association with branches all over India. The Indian Association carried on counter-agitation in favor of the Albert Bill. The British government yielded to the pressure from the Englishmen. The bill was not withdrawn and passed into law. The Albert agitation left behind the sense of defeat, disgrace in the hearts of Indians. Indirectly, it greatly helped the cause of Indian political advance. Agitation against the imprisonment of Surendranath Banerjee. Soon after the Albert Bill controversy, a charge was brought against S.N. Banerjee for the comments he had made. Although he tendered his apology, the majority of judges found him guilty and sentenced him to imprisonment. This evoked protest from all sections of people in Bengal. All business was suspended and shops were closed. The Indian Association called a meeting on 16 May 1883. About 20,000 people attended the same to protest the imprisonment of Banerjee. Eventually, S.N. Banerjee was released from jail on 4th July 1883. The National Conference. These events brought in forefront the question of political organization of all India character. In spite of remarkable achievements, the Indian Association was considered as a provincial organization. The government proposal to hold an international exhibition in Calcutta gave an opportunity to organize an all-India national conference at that time. It was expected that many prominent Indians would visit Calcutta during this occasion. Thus, the Indian Association decided to hold the conference at the same time. The conference was attended by hardly 100 delegates. In spite of this, as Dr. Anil Seal has observed, the first national conference was, in its program and proceedings, a dress rehearsal for the Indian National Congress. Indian Association remained a separate organization for a long time without any great hold upon the country. However, the ideal of the Indian Association appealed to the imagination of the educated class in India and helped in promoting a sense of unity in the country. Now I am starting with the political associations in the Bombay Presidency. Next to Bengal, Bombay became the center of the growth of political consciousness. To the British rulers, Bombay city a much happier place than Calcutta. In the mid-19th century, Bombay possessed wealthy men prepared to experiment with politics. The development of political ideas and political association in Bombay is closely bound up with the name of Dadabhai Naoroji. After completing his graduation from the Elphinstone College, Bombay, he devoted himself to the social cause. He founded the Students' Literary and Scientific Society, which undertook the cause of rational regeneration. He was a central figure of all the political organizations in Bombay. Even when he had to go to London, he organized several associations there to work for the cause of India. Foundation of the Bombay Association. On the lines of the British Indian Association of Calcutta, on 26 August 1852, the Bombay Association was founded, which was the first political association. The inaugural meeting showed the varied population of the city. The meeting was presided by Jagannath Shankar Sheth. In the meeting, it was decided that its members were to pay an annual fees of 25 rupees. Immediately, subscription of 30,000 rupees was collected by the donation to launch the association. The object of the association was to ascertain the wants of the natives of India in the Bombay Presidency and to represent to the authorities from time to time the measures calculated to advance the welfare and improvement of the country. Petitions for reforms. The working of the Bombay Association had started from now onward. The leaders of the Bombay Association sent a petition to the British Parliament in 1853 criticizing the system of administration. The first important question which engaged the intention of the Bombay Association was the rise in the taxation. Public feelings against the Licence Bill were strong in Bombay, but the leaders of Bombay Association were hesitant and slow in giving a lead for fear of displeasing the British authorities. When the Licence Bill was in the Legislative Council, Bombay Association, under great pressure from the public and local press, held a meeting at the house of Jagannath Shankar Sheth. The meeting resolved to appoint a committee to report on the demands of the association to the Legislative Council. However, it was in vain. Slackness in the activities. After the death of the President Jagannath Shankar Sheth in August 1865, the Bombay Association ceased to function. The cause of rapid decay of the Bombay Association in early 1860 is to be found in the lack of cooperation among its members. To these added the cotton boom in Bombay. Following the outbreak of the American Civil War in 1861, the members of this association were businessmen, became too busy with cotton to care for their country. The cotton boom ended in 1865, leaving behind a trail of financial disaster. It was not until the end of 1867 that the Bombay Association was revived. With its revival, a number of young graduates and lawyers such as R.G. Bhandarkar, M.G. Ranade, Firoz Shah Mehta, K.T. Tilang and Badruddin Tayabji were attracted to it. The Bombay Association remained active for 5 years. Following its revival, it maintained a regular office in the Sassoon Building, Elphinstone Circle, Bombay. It corresponded with the other political association in India and with the East India Association in London. It also sends memorials to the authorities on Bombay important questions of public interest. In 1870, the Secretary of Bombay Association went to England, where he tried to enlist the support of the people in favor of the demands of the association, such as reduction of military expenditure, the appointment of a trained person as a finance member in India, the reorganization of the Legislative Council and parliamentary inquiry into Indian affairs. The Bombay Presidency Association. The local businessmen dominated the Bombay Association. Its president Mangal Das Nathubai was the biggest property owner in the town. At that time, younger generation of English educated was growing up in Bombay. Their idea of politics differed from the members of the Bombay Association. Moreover, nothing was heard of the activities of Bombay Association. Under these circumstances, in January 1885, three prominent leaders of Bombay, Firoz Shah Mehta, K.T. Tilang and Badruddin Tayabji, set up the Bombay Presidency Association. From the beginning, it had friendly relation with the Pune Sarvajanik Sabha. In September 1885, the Bombay Presidency Association, the Pune Sarvajanik Sabha, the Mahajan Sabha of Madras, and the Indian Association of Calcutta sent a joint deputation to England to present India's case before the British electorate. The deputation was led by N. Chandravarkar from Bombay, Ramaswamy Mudaliar from Madras, and Manmohan Ghosh of Calcutta. 3 months later, it was the Bombay Presidency Association which played host to the first Congress. Pune Sarvajanik Sabha. Pune was a great rival of Bombay in Western India in the 19th century, not in commercial but in the cultural and political sphere. It was a Maratha city of par excellence, and Marathas were the rivals of the British in India. It was the first city to follow the lead of the British India Association of Calcutta. The Pune Deccan Association was floated early in 1852, but it never got off the ground. Started originally as a Pune Association in 1867 on the lines of Bombay Association, the Pune Sarvajanik Sabha got its name in April 1870. Its main object was to serve as a bridge between the government and the people. It aimed at to convey to the government the wishes and the opinion of the people regarding the laws passed by the government, to suggest ways for improving the functions of local municipality, to promote understanding between the people and the government, and to attend other matters of public interest. G.B. Joshi, M.G. Ranade, Bal Gangadhar Tilak and G.K. Gokhale were the active members of the Sabha. During the first 2 years, the Sabha concerned itself with problems with local character. The arrival of M.G. Ranade in Pune as a subordinate judge became a turning point in the history of the Sabha. Very soon, Ranade became the life and soul of the Sabha. It became the leading association of the Progressive Party of the association. A detailed study of the economic condition of agricultural classes in the Deccan was made by the Sabha. Its member rendered relief to the people of Deccan during the famine of 1876-77. In 1875, the Pune Sarvajanik Sabha sent a petition to the British Parliament asking for Indian representation in the British Parliament. In 1876, while congratulating Queen Victoria on the assumption of the title of Kesre-Hind, it made an appeal to the British Queen to give more representation to Indians in legislative councils and relax the financial burden on the poor people of India by reducing the national debt. In January 1877, a darbar was held in Delhi to proclaim the British Queen the Empress of India. At that time, the Sabha tried to create an opinion among the Indian princes for the holding of periodical conferences of representatives Indians. The growing popularity of Pune Sarvajanik Sabha caused alarm to the British authorities as well as to the pro-British press. The government increased control on the Sabha and its leaders. The Englishmen alleged that the Sabha was trying to build up an empire within the empire. Until the Bombay Presidents Association got underway in 1885, the Pune Sarvajanik Sabha was the leading association in Western India. It agitated on subjects such as the Bombay Forest Regulations, the license tax, the Ilbert Bill in favor of the local self-government. The Sabha was the first for an extension Ripon's viceroyalty. In 1884, it pressed for the reform of the Legislative Council and a recruitment of the Indians to the civil service. By building up reputation, the Sabha succeeded in winning some influence with the government, which it retained until Bal Gangadhar Tilak took over the Sabha in 1890s. Next is the political association in Madras Presidency. Madras Native Association. Political trends similar to other presidencies were at work in Madras Presidency also. A branch of the British Indian Association of Calcutta was set up under the name of Madras Native Association in 1851-52. This association also sent petitions to the Parliament, making demands similar to that of the British Indian Association and the Bombay Association. It sends petitions to the British Parliament criticizing the oppressing taxation, evils of zamindari and royatwari settlement, and delay in judicial procedures. This association also wanted appointment of more Indians to government services and establishment of legislative councils in the provinces. However, the Madras Native Association, right from its inception, was worked by officials who had hardly any hold upon the public mind. Thus, by the middle of 1862, it became practically non-operational. For 2 decades, political activity in Southern Presidency virtually ceased. However, growth of political association received a great impetus in the 80s due to the liberal policy of Lord Ripon. Under these circumstances, Madras Native Association was revived. The Mahajan Sabha of Madras. In May 1884, the Mahajan Sabha was founded in Madras with Rangaiah Naidu as its president. About 70 delegates the representing both the Tamil and Telugu districts of Madras Presidency, attended its first conference held in December 1884. The main subjects discussed at the conference were reforms of a legislative council, separation of the executive from the judiciary, changes the condition of agricultural classes. The program put forward by Mahajan Sabha was similar to the proposal adopted by the National Conference. So, after going through all this association, now the things are very clear. The ground was ready for the All India Congress. So, I can conclude after going through these works, agitations of the associations of these three presidency, that is very clear. The idea of a common political organization for the whole country was all, but it took decades to ferment and materialize. The East India Association, founded in London by Dadabhai Naoroji in October 1886, had hoped to set up branches in Calcutta and Bombay. It claimed to work for the public interest and welfare of the Indians. In 1877, the Pune Sarvajanik Sabha had urged the representative of Bombay and Bengal to work together. The Sabha sent a deputation to Calcutta to hold a conference and the inner change of ideas of the political association in Calcutta. There were protests all over India over the license tax and abolition of cotton duties. In 1880, certain developments pushed the leader of the various regional associations to common action. In 1882, there was a plan for a national meeting. The Indian Association of Calcutta had plans to hold a national conference. In 1883, K.T. Telang went to Calcutta to arrange for political concert between Calcutta and Bombay. Thus, in the year 1883-84, the various local associations in the presidency towns were forging towards unity. During November-December 1884, there was a demonstration throughout India to mark Ripon's departure from India. This demonstration marked a spirit of organization which India had never been before. So, on this association, these are the different types of questions can be framed. For example, describe the factors responsible for the genesis of Indian nationalism. Second question, explain the various factors that contributed for the growth of nationalism in India. Enumerate the factors that lead to the rise of Indian nationalism during the second half of the 19th century. Describe briefly the contribution of political association to the birth of nationalism in India during the 19th century. Next question can be trace the growth and achievements of political association in Bengal with special reference to British Indian Association and the Indian Association. Next question can be evaluate the role of the Bombay Association and Pune Sarvajanik Sabha in promoting nationalism in Western India. So with this, I had finished with the two parts, part A as well as part B. Now I am starting with the formation of Indian National Congress. The ground was ready, everything was ready. Now how the Indian National Congress had been formed. The objective of this topic is just to acquaint the foundation of the Indian National Congress and its aims and objective, and to understand the factors that lead to the emergence of Indian National Congress, and moreover to realize the role of Allan Octavian Hume and other British officers in the founding of the Indian National Congress. The period from 1876 to 1884 has been called the seed time of Indian nationalism. It was a period of passing the notorious Vernacular Press Act, which put restrictions on the press to curb Indian sentiments. The Second Afghan War brought untold suffering to the army people. There was the Albertville controversy. Lakhs of Indians died in the famines that took place during the period. Lord Lytton had his famous Dilli Darbar and the people wondered at his colossness. It was the educated people who came up as the spearhead of all movements. Nationalism was basically the creation of an English-educated middle class which became aware of the benefits of British rule. They were familiar with the liberal ideas of the modern West. They were also conscious and proud of their own rich cultural heritage. In the 19th century, beginning with Raja Ram Mohan Roy, there was an intellectual awakening in which the English-educated Indian played great roles. This awakening prepared the ground for the nationalist movement which followed in due course. The consciousness of the middle class found expression through the press and public association. A number of associations were formed before the formation of the Indian National Congress. The political association provided regional forum to articulate the economic and political aspirations of the people in the irrespective areas. However, the politically conscious Indians came to realize the need to organize an All India Forum. This aspiration led to the establishment of Indian National Congress in 1885. With the establishment of Indian National Congress, the national movement and the struggle for freedom from the British rule was launched in an organized manner. So first part I am dealing with the factors leading to the founding of the Indian National Congress. The foundation of the Indian National Congress in 1885 was not a sudden event or a historical accident. It was a result of the evolution of political ideas and organizations. The political awakening that began in the 1860s moved towards maturity in the early 1880s. The politically matured intellectuals broke the chains of narrow group and regional interest and projected themselves as representatives of national interest. There are several views on the origin of the idea of National Congress. One of these is the idea originated from the Delhi Darbar in 1877. The idea was conceived in a private meeting of some members of Theosophical Convention held at Madras in December 1884. But these views lack corroborative evidence. The move for organizing the Congress was first made by Alan Octavian Hume. Various factors were responsible for the founding of the Indian National Congress. The first cause was the reactionary and liberal policies of the Viceroys. It is believed that the reactionary measures Lord Lytton, such as Vernacular Press Act of 1878, the Arms Act and passing of Elbert Bill, fastened the process, which led to the foundation of Indian National Congress. William Bedderburn, the autobiographer of A.O. Hume, that the state of things at the end of Lord Lytton's reign was bordering upon a revolution. Commenting on the reactionary measures of Lord Lytton, Bedderburn further wrote, "These ill-starred measures of action combined with Russian methods of policy repression brought India under Lord Lytton within measurable distance of a revolutionary outbreak, and it was only in the times that Mr. Hume and his Indian advisers were inspired to intervene." However, it is important to note that the reaction policies of Lord Lytton and liberal policies of Lord Ripon acted as a medium in the birth of the Indian National Congress. No doubt, the National Congress was the direct result of the emergence of national awakening. 3 notes of Lord Ripon. Lord Ripon recorded 3 notes before relinquishing his viceroyalty. The first note highlights the fact that the government should consult the educated leaders of India in respect of public matters. He had expressed the view that the British administration in India would be shattered if it failed to adapt itself to the newly emerging spirit of progress in the country. He was of the opinion that the aspirations and ambitions of the English-educated Indian should be taken into account so that they could become the supporters of the British Raj. In the second note, Lord Ripon turned down the demand of Anglo-Indian elements for reviving the Vernacular Press Act. He argued that any attempt to revive the Vernacular Press Act in any shape would be inconsistent with the policy of British government. He further maintained that to discriminate the vernacular press was unjust and impolitic. In the third note, he asserted that the increasing number of Europeans in India was main difficult of Indian administration. To avoid such problems, the educated natives may form a sufficiently compact and intelligent body to exercise political pressure and to make their views heard and to advocate principle of government. Though Lord Ripon views shows his desire to organize the educated leaders of public opinion, there is no evidence available to suggest that before he left India, he encouraged Hume to form a compact association. Whatever Ripon was the real inspirer of the origin and objectives Indian National Congress. Role of Alan Octavian Hume. In the early 80s of the 19th century, A.O. Hume, a Scottish ex-civilian, started efforts to form an association for uniting the public workers of India on a common platform. He inherited his attitude of taking up noble causes from his father, British radical leader Joseph Hume, who was a prominent Scottish patriot and reformer. He joined the East India Company's civil service in 1849 and became a secretary in 1870s. For his pro-Indian attitude and views, Viceroy Northbrook threatened him with the dismissal from service. He also failed to get on with Lord Lytton and finally retired from service in 1882. After retirement, instead of returning to England, Hume settled down in Shimla and began to take interest in Indian politics. He was more in sympathy with the Bombay and Pune groups than with Calcutta leaders. Hume also came into contact with Viceroy Lord Ripon and became interested in his scheme of local self-government. By late 1883, he began to advise the Viceroy unofficially on Indian public opinion and politics, and appealed to graduates to the Calcutta. In the midst of Anglo-Indian agitation against the Albert Will, Hume kept himself at a distance from the controversy. After retiring from the service, Hume addressed an open letter to the graduates of the Calcutta University on 1st March 1883. He appealed to them to take an initiative in establishing an association which would promote the moral, social and political regeneration of India. He further stated that if only 50 men, good and true, could be found to join his founders, the thing could be established and the future development would be easy. These appeals of Hume were very fruitful to initiate the movement. Men were coming from all parts of India. Encouraged by this response from educated Indians, Hume launched the Indian National Union. In the summing of the First Indian National Congress, the Indian National Union played an important role. Discussion with the Indian political leaders. Between December 1884 and March 1885, Hume had talked with eminent nationalist leaders in Calcutta, Bombay and Madras. However, it was on the Bombay leaders like William Wedderburn, Dadabhai Naoroji, M.G. Ranade, Firoz Shah Mehta and D.E. Vacha that Hume relied most for launching his new political in India. He discussed with them his plans for holding annual conferences of representatives from all parts of India, organizing a central national association for directing political activity throughout the country. In March 1885, Hume and his friends from Bombay and Pune drew up a plan for an Indian National Union. The union was to take the form of an annual conference to be attended by leaders of various provisional associations. It would decide upon different types of reforms, political, social, economic and educational. Hume's meeting with the Viceroy, Lord Dufferin. After feeling the pulse of Indian leaders, Hume met the Viceroy Lord Dufferin at Shimla in early May 1885. He briefed the Viceroy about conference of representatives from all parts of India to be held in Pune in December 1885. Lord Dufferin showed interest in Hume's plan of an Indian National Union, but he objected to the idea of having any official link with the Union. He welcomed the plan of an organization through which the government might keep informed to the Indian public opinion. Dufferin suggested that the proposed body should also discuss political questions. He expected the body to perform the functions which Her Majesty's opposition did in England. Hume accepted the suggestion of Viceroy and discussed his plan with many leading Indians who also supported it. In March 1885, a circular was issued by Hume stating that the first conference of Indian National Union would be held at Pune in the last week of December 1885. This conference would be attended by delegates from Bombay, Bengal and Madras Presidency. The Pune Sarvajanik Sabha under Chiplunkar and his friends agreed to form a reception committee for hosting the first conference of Indian National Union. A reception fund was also started for this purpose. After his preliminary work in preparation for convening the conference of Indian leaders, Hume went to England and remained from August to November 1885 in England only. He consulted eminent politicians and set up a telegram union that would arrange for publication of Indian news in the leading newspapers of England. Having made all arrangements in England, Hume returned to India before the Congress began. In March 1885, it was decided that a conference of the Indian National Union would be convened at Pune during the Christmas week. Earlier, Hume and his group considered Calcutta as the most likely place for the conference, but later they opted for Pune because it was centrally located and the Sarvajanik Sabha expressed readiness to make arrangements for the conference and provide funds. However, due to the outbreak of cholera in Pune, the venue had to be shifted to Bombay. The first meeting of the Congress was held on 28 December 1885 in Gokul Das Tejpal Sanskrit College, Bombay. It was attended by 72 delegates. It was a colorful gathering, delegates from different regions appearing in their regional dresses and some in European dresses. Among the gathering were Dadabhai Naroji, K.T. Tilang, Firoz Shah Mehta, D.E. Vachai, B.A. Mulberry and N.C. Chandravarkar from Bombay, M.G. Ranade and G.G. Agarkar from Pune, Diwan Raghunath Rao, P. Rangayya Naidu, P. Ananda Charlu, and S. Subramania Iyer from Madras, W.C. Banerjee and Narendranath Sen from Calcutta, Lala Lajpat Rai and Baijnath from Agra, and A.O. Hume from Shimla. The largest number of representatives came from the Bombay Presidency, while the smallest came from Bengal. The presidency of this historical inaugural session of the Congress was W.C. Banerjee. He was one of the first ever Indian barrister and the foremost legal luminaries in his days. Aims and objectives of the Congress. The early nationalist leaders did not wish to launch a direct struggle for freedom at the initial stage of their organization. They preferred first to lay the foundation of such struggle. The aims and objectives of the Congress were stated by the President W.C. Banerjee in his presidential speech. Their basic aims and objectives can be summarized as follows: to promote the feeling of national unity, to weld India into a nation, eradication of all prejudices relating to race, creed or provinces, consolidation of sentiment and national unity, to educate the Indians in politics of the country and organize public opinion in the country, to create an all India leadership and train a common band of political work, formulate economic and political demands in such a way as to unify the people on the basis of common economic and political program. The President also enumerated the blessings conferred by the British on India. He assured that the educated Indians were loyal and well-wishers of the government. He clarified that their purpose in organizing the Congress was to represent their views to the authorities. The Congress leaders had faith in what they describe as the British sense of justice. They were not thinking in the terms of expelling the British. They wanted the policies adopted by the Government of India should aim at the welfare and good of the Indians, which meant the advancement of their interest. This was to be done through the development of representative institutions and appointment of Indians to the higher post. Government attitude towards the Congress. During the first 2 years of its inception, that is from 1885 to 1887, the British response was well disposed towards its activities. The Viceroy Lord Dufferin had entertained the Congress leaders at a garden party at Calcutta in 1886. The Governor of Madras had also organized a similar party in 1887. However, the growing demands of the leaders for a representative and responsible government alarmed the authorities. In 1888, the Congress started a paid agency in London for political propaganda for the welfare of the people of India. This all the more irritated the British rulers. Pro-government paper also began to criticize the moderate leaders. On the demands of the moderate leaders for a representative government in India, Lord Dufferin criticized the activities of the moderate leaders in 1886 with these words: "Congressmen are seeking to sit in the chariot of sun. How can any reasonable man imagine that the British government would allow this microscopic minority to control the administration of that majestic and multiform empire?" In 1897, the Secretary of State of India, George Hamilton, referring to the Congress demand, said in the House of Commons, "The liberties of the British Constitution did not apply to criminal lunatics." The British officials branded the Congress leaders as disloyal babus, seditious Brahmins, and violent villains. The Congress was described as a factory of sedition. Lord Curzon, the Viceroy of India, declared in 1900, "The Congress is tottering to all its fall, and one of my great ambitions, while in India, is to assist it in the peaceful demise." The British rulers began to describe it as the organization of the Hindus and followed the policy of divide and rule. They tried to drive a wedge between the Hindus and Muslims. However, in spite of all this, the Indian National Congress not only survived but also emerged as a strong national movement that proved to be adversary of the British Empire in India. So, with this, I can say with the founding of the Indian National Congress, freedom movement had started. In order to understand the freedom movement, it can be divided into three periods. The period from 1885 to 1820 again divided into two parts. The first period is 1885 to 1904. Period is known as the period of moderates. The leaders were Dadabhai Naoroji, S.N. Banerjee, G.K. Gokhale, Badruddin Tayebji. I will say here that Lala Lajpat Rai, Bal Gangadhar Tilak were the members of the Congress. But at that time, Congress was dominated only by these leaders. They were the moderates because they were having full faith among the Britishers. They were having the feeling that Indians can be trained under the British rule only. So that is why they followed a very moderate methods to file petitions, passing resolutions, sending petitions, and they whatever they want to do under the four corners of the laws only. And after 20 years, that is in 1905, Lala Lajpat Rai, Bal Gangadhar Tilak and Bipin Chandra Pal, they were not satisfied with the methods of the moderates. They said ki no, and these people are known as the extremists. Bal Gangadhar Tilak had already said ki Swaraj is my birthright and I will have it. They were not satisfied with the methods which were adopted by the moderates. They came with the new methods, for example, Swadeshi. They put stress on the Swadeshi movement. They were in favor of the boycott and hartals, and that is non-cooperation also. Besides this one, hartals and boycott, they had given the positive method, that is the use of Swadeshi. So that is why they were called as the extremists. And during this time only, I can say, another group was also there who were not satisfied with the methods of the extremists. They were having the fear, they were having the feeling, unless we will create terror in the minds of the Britishers, they will not listen our voice. So among them, Bhagat Singh, all these people had come to the forefront. They were called by the Britishers as terrorists, but we call them as revolutionaries. So they have their different methods. So in 1920s, Mahatma Gandhi had come to the fold of the freedom movement. So from 1920 to 1947 till India got independence, this period is known as the Gandhian era. So with this, I have come to an end, and afterwards we can say 1920 to 1947 and 1947 onwards up to 1964 till the death of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. After the independence, the total era was dominated by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. This era is known as the Nehru era. So the question for this founding of the Indian National Congress can be, trace the circumstances that led to the foundation of Indian National Congress in 1885. Next question can be, what were the factors leading to the emergence of Indian National Congress? States its initial aims and objectives. With this, I come to an end with the first unit. Thank you very much.